If you've recently flown on the A330neo, then chances are it's been the -900 variant. And the reason for this is quite simple. Very few airlines are buying the smaller -800. Just over a dozen A330-800s have been ordered from the entire neo family, of which 464 have been ordered to date. But despite being Airbus's worst selling plane of all time, the A330-800 is a remarkable aircraft in many ways. It boasts the latest and greatest engine technology in the form of the mighty Rolls-Royce Trent 7000, which sees an 11% raw fuel burn reduction versus the original A330's Trent 700. Its wing has been redesigned with advanced materials, including a strengthened structure, composite wing box, and new blended composite sharklets. On top of this is the optimized cabin layout, which allows for more seating. And when we combine these factors together with the new engines, the overall fuel burn per seat is sitting around 14% better than the original A330 variants. Being the smaller member of the neo family, the -800 on paper should excel as being a mid-sized 257-seat long-range twin that could replace older A330s and open up new long and thin routes. And seeing as its maximum seating capacity is around 400 in a single-class configuration, the -800 could even be used for medium-haul high-density routes. The neo features Airbus's latest airspace cabin design, including better air quality, lower noise levels, and a new sidewall and ceiling panels giving the impression of bigger windows. And so the A330-800 doesn't just seem tailored for airlines, but for an improved passenger experience as well. But despite all the benefits, the -800 has only secured 12 orders, which is a far cry from its larger sibling. So then, what's going on here? Why is a seemingly brilliant aircraft not being chosen? Well, to start, we should understand why Airbus decided to build it in the first place, and what it was meant to do. Fleet planning is crucial to an airline's success, and every single airline out there makes decisions based on what will give them the best return on investment. But let's not forget that airplanes are extortionately expensive, so choosing the right plane for the job is undeniably crucial. So where does the A330neo come into all of this? Well, Airbus started the neo program with the -900, meant to replace the -300 and to take on the Boeing 787. Airbus then shrank it to make the -800, replacing the -200, which was a smash hit with over 600 units sold. So the -800 was kind of an afterthought, but still designed to fill a specific gap, medium to long haul routes where range and capacity are key. But the aforementioned -900 and 787 have stolen that role, leaving the -800 with nowhere to go. If the A330-800 is selling for pretty much the same list price as the -900, but has less seats available, then the obvious choice would be to buy the larger neo variant, which could perform the same route with more passengers. And that's exactly what airlines have done. And for long and thin routes, the 787-8 has already covered that niche, and even narrow bodies like the A321neo and A321XLR are taking over this market segment, resulting in the A330-800 being even more redundant. But the market mismatch is only the beginning. On one end of the spectrum, airlines are investing heavily in larger twins like the A350-1000 or Boeing 777X to allow them to pack in hundreds of passengers and make use of economies of scale. In other words, filling one wide body is more cost effective than scheduling multiple smaller ones on the same route. We'll see this tactic being used more and more as travel demand continues to rise and airports become increasingly congested. On the other end of the scale, some airlines are quite keen on smaller, long-range jets, like the Boeing 787 or A321XLR. To reiterate, airlines want to use these jets on routes that don't justify a wide-body with more than 300 seats, that still require range. This leaves the A330-800 in an awkward spot. At 250 seats, it's simply too small for busy long-haul routes, and the -900 and 787-9 are far better options for maximising revenue. And of course the order book proves this. Because the -900 better competes with the 787-9 and is itself a larger widebody, it's gained the lion's share of the A330neo's orders. At the end of the day, airlines don't buy planes just because they look good on paper. They buy them because the economics make sense. And it's here where the A330-800 runs into serious trouble. You see, wide bodies are expensive to operate no matter what, and operating a flight is pretty much the same whether you're using the -800 or the larger -900. The fuel, crew, and airport fees are more or less the same, but the difference is the -800 has roughly 30 fewer seats. so those costs are being spread over a smaller number of paying passengers. That means the smaller jet ends up with a worse cost per seat, even though it's technically a bit more efficient due to less weight. And when airlines look at the numbers, the Dash 900 just makes way more sense. But the problem isn't just limited to cost per seat. The competition doesn't help either. To reiterate, the Dash 800 isn't just facing internal cannibalization. It's also been pitched against the mighty Dreamliner family, and the 787-9 has become the default choice for airlines that want a mid-sized long-haul jet, leaving very little room for the A330-800 to squeeze into. And this brings us neatly onto the next key issue: resale. Seeing as just a handful of A330-800s are being built, airlines worry about being stuck with an aircraft that nobody wants second-hand. And this also means airlines may struggle to lease it out at good rates or be forced to sell it at a weaker price. Our final point is a big one, and to understand why the A330-800 exists at all, let's rewind to when Airbus was planning the A330neo program. Back then, the mighty popular A330-200 was still in service with dozens of airlines. It was a smaller, long-range widebody that could fly the routes the bigger A330-300 couldn't fly profitably. Obviously, it seemed those airlines would sometime soon need a replacement. But Airbus were wrong, as we've seen. But they weren't crazy for thinking this way. As an example, let's take the 777 re-engining. The 300ER was launched as a logical stretch of the earlier 777-200 and 300 legacy variants, with newer GE90 engines and better range. The benefit of this wasn't just limited to raw specs. Airlines didn't need to retrain their pilots. And just for context, the average cost of retraining widebody pilots ranges from $30,000 to $50,000. And multiply that up by the number of pilots an airline employs, then we are easily talking millions. Plus the millions lost in revenue from having the pilots in training instead of flying money-generating flights. Because airlines didn't need to retrain, the cockpit commonality of the 777-300ER proved to be a huge selling point. So by applying the same logic to the A330 scenario, Airbus were hoping they could capitalize on a simple design feature to save millions for an airline. But the problem was timing. Unfortunately for Airbus, they were late to the party, and the industry had moved on. In 2011, the first 787 had been delivered to ANA, and in 2014, when the A330neo program was officially announced, the Dreamliner had been in service for 3 years, proving its worth and building a strong reputation, and the Dash 8 and Dash 9 variants had already received hundreds of orders. Airlines that wanted mid-sized long-haul jets had already committed to the 787, and the A330neo was an answer to a problem that had already been solved. And this is where the strategic misstep shows. Airbus underestimated how much the market had shifted. In the 2000s, airlines were keen on long-range, smaller widebodies, like the A330-200 or 767, but by the mid-10s, airlines wanted either bigger jets with economies of scale, or smaller ones to operate long and thin routes. The 787 was a perfect fit, and even the A330-900 turned out to be exactly what airlines wanted. With around 300 seats, it hit the sweet spot of passenger demand, competing directly with the 787-9. And in some cases even came out on top, especially with loyal Airbus customers. Because it was a straightforward upgrade of an already proven aircraft, it came at a lower price point than the 787. A good real-world example of this is TAP Air Portugal, who were the launch customer for the A330-900 in 2018. For them, sticking with Airbus gave huge benefits like pilot commonality and fleet continuity, and Airbus was willing to offer competitive pricing to secure them. I'm a fan of the saying, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and looking back, Airbus shouldn't have split the A330neo program at all. All the demand funneled into one variant, and the Dash 800 quickly became a niche product with almost no appeal. But at the end of the day, the A330-800 is definitely not a bad airplane. It just never fit the industry. The aircraft's limited market appeal and competition from both Airbus and Boeing have overshadowed its technical strengths. You could say that in addition to the 787-9's better fuel economy per seat, the internal competition from the A330-900 has cannibalized the sales of the smaller Dash 800 variant, and airlines just don't want this size of airplane anymore. But it's not a total loss. For a handful of airlines like Kuwait Airways or Air Greenland, the Dash 800's unique combination of range and size filled a very specific niche that no other aircraft could. So what do you guys think? Have I nailed the analysis, or am I missing something? Be sure to leave a comment down below with your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, then here are some more I definitely recommend you check out. Alright then, I'll see you over there.